Alright, you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called Broken Dreams. Rodrigo, Paniagua. How many times have you turned on the TV or radio and heard one of them fucked up stories about someone who either abused or did something heinous to their kids? You sit there cringing, listening to the details, asking yourself how someone could bring themselves to do something like that. How someone could bring themselves to harm or injure their own flesh and blood. And then you ask yourself, what the fuck is wrong with people? The messed up thing about that is that there never seems to be a shortage or an end to this type of diabolical depravity. There's a myriad and torrent of these same types of stories all over the world. Kids killing their parents, parents killing their kids, fathers or mothers slaughtering their own families, genocide, homicide, patricide, filicide, sororicide, fratricide, parricide. It happens in every way imaginable. Violence and the act of violence is something I've obviously talked a lot about on my channel. Usually I talk about gang members killing gang members and the criminal mindset that develops within this lifestyle. Amongst the criminal element or within the gang subculture, the majority of the killing is premised or effectuated on either the elevation of status or the pursuit of attaining more respect. Even though the reasons often seem asinine and brainless, there's an underlying purpose that seems to justify killing your own ethnicity. Or at least it's all prettied up and made to appear justified. But even gang members are beginning to see and recognize the ignorance of their actions. Whether it's through forging peace accords or just bringing awareness to the topic, there's been some measure of semblance attained over the course of time. But the raw acts of everyday violence that's being perpetrated through the world by kids, by broken families, or by crazed lunatics has no purpose and there is no sense to it. Oftentimes, when some of these horrendous stories break and come out in the mainstream media, there will be certain cases that some of us latch onto or take a personal interest in. The details are so shocking that it sometimes causes us to follow these stories and invest ourselves in the case as it plays out in the media. I remember one of the cases that captured my attention and got me after the first time I seen the story break on TV. It was a case out of Tracy, California, involving the disappearance of an 8-year-old little girl named Sandra Cantu. The little girl had been playing outside in a trailer park when all of a sudden she disappeared and was kidnapped by someone. The thing that stood out to me was a video that they kept playing that apparently captured her last few minutes playing outside minutes before she was abducted. I had seen thousands of other cases that involved child abductions, kidnappings, and situations that resulted in children disappearing, and they never got to me like that case did. I don't know what it was, but I think it was something about the way the video depicted the innocence of this little girl playing, then being scooped up and abducted by some undesirable piece of shit. Oddly, and to the surprise of everyone who was watching, it ended up being a 28-year-old woman by the name of Melissa Huckabee, who would later get charged with kidnapping, raping, and murdering her. The whole case was crazy, as women usually aren't the ones who commit these types of crimes. But 10 days after little Sandra Cantu was kidnapped and abducted, her little lifeless body was discovered, stuffed in a suitcase, and thrown into an irrigation pond somewhere out by Stockton. The cause of death was later listed as homicidal asphyxiation. She basically had been strangled and choked out. That was one case that stood out and caught my attention. But another case that got to me and hit close to home was a case out of San Jose, California that involved the stabbing and killings of 2 little girls, their pregnant mother, and the unborn 5-month-old fetus she was carrying. The reason why I say that this particular case hits close to home for me is because I was close friends with someone else who was friends with Letitia and her 6-year-old daughter, Adrena. In fact, they didn't even call Adrena by her real name. They referred to her as Bubbles, a name only known and used by family and those who were close to her. The mutual friend had a young daughter who was also friend with Bubbles, and they had been to some of Bubbles' previous birthday parties. Anyways, the perpetrator, Rodrigo Paniagua, ended up being the father of the 2 little girls, 3-year-old Annalisa and her 6-year-old sister, Adrena, aka Bubbles. Paniagua was also the boyfriend of his pregnant girlfriend, Leticia Chavez, who was carrying his 5-month-old unborn fetus. This was one of those cases that made you sick to your stomach. It made you want to inflict the same kind of pain on the father that he inflicted on his family. How can a father take a butcher knife and repeatedly stab the life out of his own flesh and blood? How can he continue to sink that blade into their tiny bodies as they lay there looking back at him with fear and terror in their eyes? And even worse, how can someone watch the life bleed out of their tiny babies until they all stop moving? How does a father's compassion to help his dying children vanish or become inconsequential? These types of crimes are the type of crimes that shock your conscience. Once you see the bodies or the images of something like this, it's seared into your mind forever, and it's something you can never forget. When I think about the tragic events that unfolded in this case, the one thing that keeps bothering me is how this guy Paniagua was able to completely disconnect himself while he was committing these heinous acts. As fathers, we're supposed to be the best protectors of our children and loved ones. A father just shouldn't be able to do something like this to his own kids. The other thing that really bothers me about this case is the type of pain and terror these little girls went through as they watched their father stab them to death. It's almost too much to bear. And the cold part about it is that this all stemmed from jealousy and insecurity. He was the kind of insecure dude who obviously felt like he had to implement ridiculous policies in order to keep his girlfriend to himself. No makeup outside the house, no skirts, no drinks with friends, and most importantly of all, no breaking up with them. Policies that dictated what she could or could not wear. Policies that dictated who she could or could not see. He was the type of dude who would get jealous over the relationship his girlfriend had with her biological family. In his mind, everyone seemed to pose a threat. If she got too close to her mom or her dad, they were considered a threat, and he found different ways to isolate her more. All this demonstrated just how sick and demented this guy really was. But it all came to a bloody end on October 14, 2005, when Paniagua crept into the bedroom where his 2 daughters and pregnant girlfriend, Leticia Chavez, were sleeping. The couple had been arguing, and Leticia had apparently gave Paniagua the impression that she was in the process of leaving him. This, of course, was a violation of one of the policies that he had always warned Leticia never to break. I guess the possibility of losing his family and the possibility of seeing his girlfriend with someone else just proved to be too much for him. His position and his thinking was obvious. If he couldn't have her, then nobody was going to have her. Once Paniagua came to terms with his decision and he set his plan in motion, he grabbed an 11-inch butcher knife out the kitchen and waded into his girlfriend and his 2 daughters lay down to go to sleep. Once he thought they were asleep, he walked into their bedroom, being as quiet as he could, and then began carrying out his sinister and deadly plan. Leticia was the first one he began to stab. After stabbing her the first couple of times, she woke up to the deadly nightmare that had now become her reality. He stabbed her in the chest, in the arms, in the neck, and in the legs. Leticia tried to fight off the attack, and she tried to do everything she possibly could to defend herself. But in the end, there was nothing she could do to stop him. He grabbed the blade of the knife several times in an effort to stop the attack, but the blade of the knife just sliced open huge gashes in her hands. The attack was so violent that Paniagua had to actually stop and use the mattress to straighten out the knife so he could continue using it. Leticia tried her best to protect her unborn baby in her stomach, as well as her 2 daughters that were now crying beside her. But eventually, this became too much for her, and it was to no avail. She began losing too much blood and started to lose consciousness. Right before she lost consciousness, for good, the last images she would see in this horrific world were images of Paniagua plunging the knife deep into her stomach in carefully calculated areas, purposely trying to kill their unborn child. The next victim to be stabbed was 6-year-old Bubbles. Like her mother, Bubbles was also stabbed in her little stomach, in her arms, in her legs, and in her chest. It didn't take that many stab wounds with an 11-inch butcher knife to inflict the type of fatal wounds necessary in order to kill a 6-year-old little girl. The final victim was 3-year-old Annalisa. Her body was so small that the 11-inch butcher knife went through and through her entire body. Like her mother and sister, Annalisa was stabbed in the neck, in her chest, in her stomach, and in her back. Again, when I think about this sinister and diabolical act as it was carried out by this monster, who was their biological father, I can't help but to imagine what these little girls were thinking as this knife was plunged into their little bodies and they were subjected to this horrific level of pain. Using a knife to stab the life out of someone is as up close and personal as you can get. It's very intimate and personal. You not only feel the air being expended from the body of the person you're stabbing, but you can also feel the life slowly bleeding out as well. I've obviously never stabbed children or a pregnant mother like this dirtbag did, but I've stabbed other people in the streets, and I'll just say this. I remember the very first time I stabbed someone, and I remember how it made me feel. It changed me. I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but when you really stab someone and you feel that knife sink into their body, you can actually feel the air coming out. And it's a feeling that I can only describe as a trembling feeling. It's nothing to glorify and it's nothing to feel proud of. I stabbed someone from San Francisco in a neighborhood called the Excelsior District, and I stabbed him so bad it resulted in him becoming a Christian and changing his entire life. I ruptured his spleen, punctured his liver, and I did all kinds of other internal damage that almost killed him. That's probably one of the things from my past that I have a lot of remorse for, because every time I see this guy, he always stops me and wants to pray for me. Sometimes out of respect for people, I'll stop and let them speak their gospel. But with this guy, I have always stopped and I gave him that respect. Anyways, I got off topic, so let me get back to this dirtbag Paniagua. Immediately after he committed these 4 homicides, he torched the house and tried to destroy the evidence by burning the bodies. In retrospect, I still remember when this happened and they showed a news segment of the house while it was still burning. At the time, the fire department and responding law enforcement had no idea that there were bodies inside of the house or that this was a homicide scene that had been set on fire. They just thought it was a house that had caught on fire and that nobody was inside. They would obviously find out later after they searched through the debris. But the thing that I clearly remember about the news footage that showed the house burning is that they caught glimpses of this cat Paniagua outside the house in the crowd smoking a cigarette, trying to pass himself off as just one of the many bystanders who had gathered to watch the firefighters put out the fire. They didn't immediately catch it. They ended up catching it later after he became a suspect and they seen him in the footage. Later on, after Paniagua became a suspect and was arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson, he copped to the crimes and gave a full detailed confession. I was never anywhere around this dude in the county jail, but he was there when I was there and I had the unfortunate opportunity of seeing him in passing. I seen him being escorted through the court tunnels a few times, but they kept this dude housed in the observation cells. His attorney, Tracy Owens, tried to pitch an insanity defense, but this didn't fly with the jury. In 2016, it took the jury less than 2.5 hours to find Rodrigo Paniagua guilty of the murder charges, and the same jury elected to impose the death penalty. Today, Paniagua is housed on California's death row. He joins around 700 other condemned inmates who might actually never see the inside of the death chamber. California currently has a moratorium on the death penalty, and California voters might finally be ready to see the pendulum swing back the other way. So for now, Paniagua just spends his days rotting in East Block, locked in a cell that's smaller than most closets. The majority of condemned death row inmates consider him as trash for killing babies, and he's what they label as being on dead cell status. This means he's excommunicated by the majority of death row's general population inmates, and that he's assigned to program on a yard with the likes of other inmates such as Richard Allen Davis, Ramon Saucedo, Charles Ng, Scott Peterson, Marcus Wesson, and other inmates who are labeled as baby killers, chomos, or rapists. As for Leticia Chavez, her unborn baby, and her 2 daughters, Annalisa and Bubbles, their souls have gone to a better place. They rest in eternal peace, and their memories continue to be remembered by many. For those who were the closest to them, their deaths still might be hard to accept, and the bigger purpose for their losses might not make sense yet. But everything in life happens for a reason. Meanwhile, Paniagua is forced to deal with his inner demons. He remains a broken man with no sense of moral purpose. If nothing else, I guarantee you one thing for sure. I promise you that he has had many sleepless nights on death row, and that he loses just a little bit more of his soul every time he pulls out that envelope and looks at the pictures of the babies he killed. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. This is another short one, but as I've said before, doing these short ones enables me to put out a lot more. As for those of you who have questions, again, put them in the community section or in that short that promos Q&A number 29. With that said, we just want to extend our appreciation to all of you. To those of you who have been with us for the long haul, to those of you who are new to the channel, and to all those of you who continue motivating us into becoming the type of channel that we are. A positive, drama-free platform. We appreciate all of you, our viewers, for without you, we would cease to exist.